now that we've created our requisition and have sent it for approval, we are now working into the step of looking at any candidates that apply to our requisition and then also dispositioning the candidates. So dispositioning the candidates and being able to look at candidate applications and resumes is the next step in the process here. So as I mentioned before, we've created our requisition. We've then sent that requisition for approval. And now for our scenario here, let's pretend that it went through the approval process, was approved, and then posted by Talent Acquisition, and that's where we're at now. So what I'm first going to show you is, again, we can search for the requisition by title or rec ID. I am going to search by one of the words in our working title, which will be dispositioning. Again, I've created this requisition here specifically for the training. So you can see here a couple things on the requisition that I'm going to show you. So by searching for it, you can see that we have this red flag. We have a person here, which is candidate count, and then the title of the requisition along with the ID number. The red flag is letting you know that this is a new requisition that has been posted that you have not looked at yet. Okay, so you'll see here a little bit later, once I click into the requisition itself, this red flag will go away because at that point, we've now looked at it and acknowledged that we've seen it. The next part here is the candidate count. So this is how many candidates that currently applied to our requisition. We only have one for the training purposes here. If this number was 50 candidates, this would say 50. Next is the working title that we've created. So Rock the Mascot Dispositioning, and then we have our rec ID, our status, and then that it is currently posted, the day that it was posted and the time that it was posted as well. Let's click into the requisition itself. So the first thing I want to show you here is the status. So it is open and currently posted. As I mentioned before, again, we created our requisition and we sent it for approval. For our training purposes, we're going to pretend that it has been approved by the actual RC Dean level and actually Talent Acquisition. So I'll show you where in real life you would go to check that. Where you would go is to the Approvals tab. And you can see here the order that we had, so the RC Dean level and Talent Acquisition. So you can see that the decision was approved, the date and time that it was approved, and then any comments that would have been added by the RC Dean level Talent Acquisition or whoever looked at this requisition. So again, the way that we found that was we searched for our requisition, found it here, clicked into the requisition, and then looked at the Approvals tab. Okay, let's go back to our requisition list. So you can see here now that because we've clicked into the requisition title once, that red flag is now gone. Again, that's because we've now looked at the requisition and have acknowledged that we've seen it. We'll go into the requisition here again. At this point in the process, what we want to look at now is how many candidates have applied, and we want to be able to go through and be able to disposition and look at these candidates. Okay, so where you get to the candidate screen from here is in the left-hand corner where it says candidates for this requisition and has a number. If you go ahead and click on that number, it will take you into the candidate list. In the candidate list here, again, we see the red flag. That is because for candidate John Smith, we have not looked at their application or resume. We also have a to be verified sign. I'll show you what that means here in a bit, and I'll take you through some of the other icons here as well. But I do want to point out our candidate John Smith. The step is new and the status is new to be reviewed. Let's first talk about the to be verified icon. So what this means is that there's something within the application that needs to be verified. So when we click into the application here, you'll see that it brings us into the candidate profile. As you scroll down where it says number 5, screening, we can expand the section. And in this section, you see the disqualification questions. So something that needs to be verified is one of the questions here. So you can see here, are you at least 18 years or older? If you answered yes, the candidate passes. If it was no, the candidate would be disqualified. There are only 2 questions here that would disqualify a candidate. Are they 18 years of age? And do they have a high school diploma or GED? The question that was answered here that needs to be verified is, do you have any relatives employed at the University of Pittsburgh? In this case, John Smith said yes. It was his sister. So you can see here, if you hover over the bubble, it will give you the explanation. So it says Sister Sally Smith, Pediatrics. Because we're hiring for the athletics administration, Sally Smith working in pediatrics would have no issues on this recruitment or on this hire. Okay, it would only be an issue if they were in the same department and one or the other was supervising the other individual here. Okay, so in this case, everything was verified. We're good to go in this instance, and there's no issues here at all. Okay, so what we can do is we'll go back to the candidate list, and you can see now that we've clicked into John's candidate profile, that red flag is now gone as well. So a couple of the icons that I want to speak about here are the steps. This means that the candidate is in at least one selection process here at the University of Pittsburgh. So that means that they would be being considered for another position here at the university. Unless it is another position within your department, you would not be able to see any of the other jobs that John has applied for. Also, we have the internal candidate icon. So if a candidate has applied through our internal web, it would also let you know here by showing a little house icon that they are an internal employee of some kind here at the University of Pittsburgh. So now that John has applied, let's go in here and let's review his application and let's disposition this candidate. So again, we click into the candidate profile on their name, and that will take us in here into the candidate profile. So for those of you that use PitSource before Talent Center, you could probably remember the million different dispositioning codes that were available to you. So we wanted to make that process a little bit easier, a little bit more efficient. So what we have is one-click dispositioning for you. We have our qualified button here, and we have our rejected button, and you will see these throughout the process here when we're dispositioning. As we look through the candidate's profile and application, there may be multiple reasons why we would reject a candidate. So for the training, I'm going to take you into both instances here and kind of go through the process. So if we click the rejected button, you will see that it will bring up a rejection screen. On the rejection screen, what we want to show you is the details or reasons why you would reject a candidate. At this first step, so new to be reviewed, there are only two reasons why you would disposition a candidate as rejected. That would be if they do not meet the minimum qualifications of the job or if they applied too late in the process. These are the two reasons that we're giving you, so you do have to choose from one of these two reasons. What's important to realize, if you decide to, again, disposition this candidate as rejected, they will receive an email within 15 minutes letting them know that they are rejected or are not being considered for this position. It will not give them the reason as to why they are being rejected or dispositioned as so, but they will receive an email letting them know that they're no longer being considered. So be careful with who you reject at this stage, and if you are going to reject someone at this stage, again, make sure that you are not going to be considering them at all in the future. For today's training, we are not going to be rejecting John, so we'll cancel there. We will acknowledge that John does meet the minimum qualifications for this job, which is education level and years of experience, and we will qualify this individual. So we hit the qualified button, and you'll now see that the step will change to initial screen or selected for screening. At this point in the process here, you can see now that we have three dispositioning options. We have rejected, select for interview, and we have select for phone screen. So at the initial screen, this is where you're really diving into the candidate's resume. So again, we qualified John for meeting the minimum qualifications. That is, again, the education level and the years of experience. This is where you're going to dive into, is it relevant experience? So if you determine that John does meet the years of experience level and it's relevant experience and the education level, we would go ahead and maybe want to select for interview or select for phone screen. These are both positive dispositioning functions. We have rejected still. For rejected, if we click there, you'll see now that the details or dispositioning codes have now changed. At this step in the process, you'll see that there are a lot more reasons why we would select somebody or reject somebody at this point. Okay, so we have phone screen reasons, but we also have that they do not meet preferred qualifications, and this is with work experience, education, or both. Okay, and again, at this stage as well, so at the initial screen step and selected for screening, at this stage as well, if you reject a candidate, they will again receive notice within 15 minutes that they're no longer being considered. Again, it will not show them a reason, but they will receive that within 15 minutes. So for today's exercise, let's say after the initial screen that we would be breaking down our candidates for phone screens. So if I go ahead and click the phone screen function, you'll see that the candidate is still active and they are under initial screen, select for phone screen. At this point again, we phone screened this individual and we are going to qualify them and select them for interview. Now that we've selected them for interview, they're at the step for interview, pending interview results, and we still have 3 different dispositioning options. We have rejected, we have select for hire, and we have select as finalist. One thing I did want to mention is anywhere throughout the process after we initially qualify the individual, we are able to launch reference checks. So if you're doing your own reference checks, that is fine, but there is an option for you to use Skill Survey, which is our outside vendor. You can do that for any candidate by going into their candidate profile, selecting more actions, scrolling down to request a screening service, and changing the available services to reference checks. We have more information on reference checks in our quick reference guides if you want more information on how to use Skill Survey. At this point, now that we are interviewing candidates, again, we have the rejected dispositioning status, we have select for hire, and we have select as finalists. The reason we would use select as finalists would be is if we interviewed 3 candidates and we know that we want to move forward with 1 candidate, but we want to keep the other 2 in contention. So we would put them at finalist. So if our first candidate would decline the offer, or for any reason we would not be able to hire that individual, we would be able to move to one of our finalists and be able to hire them. So for this training, we're going to select them as a finalist for now, just to kind of show you the step in status. So you can see that the status changes to interview and select as finalist. Now we would either reject the candidate or we could select for hire. So for this instance, again, to start, we're going to reject the candidate. And you can see here that in the interview step, select as finalist, again, our dispositioning codes have changed. However, the one difference at this step in the process is now that we're in the interview stage, the candidate will not receive immediate notification within 15 minutes that they're not being considered for the position. Okay, we wanted to personalize this step a little bit more for you. So in the interview step, if you did interview somebody, you have the option to reach out personally and maybe let that person know that they are getting the job or they're not getting the job. So we're going to move on here and we are going to select John for hire. So when we click select for hire, you'll see that the step is offer to be made, and now the dispositioning or the one-step dispositioning statuses are now gone. Okay, at this point, what we would want to do, now that we've decided that John is who we want to hire, we would want to create the offer. To create the offer, you go to more actions while we're in the candidate profile. You go to more actions, create offer. When you go to create the offer here, you'll see that it brings up the offer screen and we have offer new. That is again because this is the new offer that we are creating. Our status is draft and the offer will remain in draft form until we send it for approval. Now let's go through and fill out the rest of the offer. Our first part here is the start date. Don't worry about the tentative box here. As you send this offer for approval, as it goes through the approval chain and gets to talent acquisition, where again this offer will be made, talent acquisition understands that the start date you're selecting is tentative. It's going to be based off of how quick the offer gets through the approval process, but also when the candidate can start, when they can realistically start. Okay, so for the start date, select the tentative start date that you would like for your candidate and continue throughout the offer. The next part we have here is expiration date. For the expiration date, we have the date that the offer is created on, which is May 10th. The expiration date automatically goes about 2 weeks from the day that the offer is created. This is a safe amount of time for everything to get through the approval process, get the talent acquisition, where they can then edit this expiration date. The expiration date is tied to the e-offer that the candidate eventually has to accept. You'll see that here a little bit later on throughout the process, but again, this expiration date is tied to that e-offer that the candidate will eventually have to accept. The next part in the offer process we have here is the annual salary. For our training here today, we're going to put 40,000 as the annual salary. We will put the pay basis as monthly. The pay amount is the monthly amount that this person would be making if they did accept the annual salary. So in this case, it'll be $3,333.34. Okay, so that's 40,000 divided by 12. The next section we have here is maximum candidate offer amount. So what this does here, this allows you to say, we really like this candidate. If we do have a issue where the candidate counter offers, this is basically saying here that this would be the highest amount that we would be willing to go up to as a department. So you can see here that the 45,000 is above the midpoint. So that will have effect on this question here, which is, are any of the offers above midpoint or outside of guidelines? Now that we've put our candidate offer amount in at 45,000, the next step here in the process is the FLSA status. This is asking you if the position is exempt or non-exempt. So in this case, with the requisition, this is exempt. So to be able to move this value over, and you can do this through any part of the offer, all you have to do is just hover over the value, click there, and it will copy it over. And again, you could do that for any step in the requisition to copy over to the offer. The next part we have here is, are any of the offer amounts above midpoint and or outside of guidelines? So in this case, because this is a new hire, the only thing that we would have to worry about is the midpoint. And in this case, our maximum candidate offer amount is above the midpoint, so we would have to select yes. And you'll notice when we select yes here, when we go to send this for approval, this will automatically put compensation in the approval chain. If we would select no, that would mean that compensation would not be in the approval chain. If you do select yes that it is outside of guidelines, please enter justification here. The next part we have here is job classification. You can just go ahead and copy these values over. So for job classification, make sure you copy that over. For position, for department, go ahead and start typing in your department name. Travel and expense approver, this will be somebody's name within your department, as will provisional reminder contact. I'm just using the same person for these examples. This could be a different person for each of these within your department. Work schedule, you can move over from the requisition, as well as child protection clearances. And then if child protection clearances were applicable, so if you selected yes, you would want to select the package here as well. So as you can see here, we went through and filled out our entire offer. So what we want to do at this point is save. And you can see that now the offer changes to current. It is still in draft form, but now this is our current offer that we have just created. So after you save, hit save and close. When you hit save and close, you can see that it's going to bring you back to the main dispositioning or main candidate profile page. So we are able to still edit the offer here, but to send it for approval, what we need to do is go to more actions, click the drop down box, and select request approval. When you select request approval, you'll see here that it will bring you to the request approval page. On this page, you can see the approval chain. So we have the RC Dean level. We have Jen Bo-Pritt's name here. She represents compensation, so this would be a compensation analyst name here. We have our senior office, and we have talent acquisition. This again is the required approval chain, but you are able to add approvers and add comments here as needed. We are not going to enter any comments in here. We're not going to add any approvers at this point. We did show you earlier how to add approvers. The same rules apply where if you add an approver, you would have to make them first in order, and as you go down through, change these accordingly, okay? To where RC Dean would be 2, compensation 3, senior officer 4, talent acquisition 5. But again, that's only if we add an approver. If you're not adding anybody, keep this as is, enter your comments, and hit done. Now that we've sent the offer for approval, it now brings us back to the main candidate page here. You can see now that the step is offer, approval in progress. That again is because we've just sent the offer for approval, and now it has to go through and be approved through that approval chain. Once it's approved through the approval chain, it will end with talent acquisition, where they will then make the verbal offer, and then they will send the e-offer to the candidate. we have to take into account that, again, it's gone through the approval process, has been approved, the verbal offer has been made, and the e-offer has been sent. We are going to take you in and show you what it looks like for a candidate to go in and accept that e-offer and then go through the onboarding process.